What's the story, everyone? Welcome back to GA Fan TV. I hope you're all keeping wonderfully well. My name is Aaron. I'm delighted to be joined here today by the sports editor of the Belfast Media Group, David Mohan. We're here to preview this weekend's Allianz Hurling League games. Of course, a lot of very big games obviously taking place this weekend. I suppose you have the likes of Galway, of course, taking on Tipperary, of Waterford going up against Limerick, and of course Cork playing Westmeath in an important game, of course, as well. But I suppose there's only one place really to start, David, and obviously you're an Antrim man, so I suppose I thought I'd bring someone in today to share some Antrim perspective, because I suppose you're flying at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're coming into Division 1, I suppose there was that sort of sense of the unknown. Are they going to be able to make a step up? How was the jump going to be? And over the course of two games, you've got to say that you've got to be relatively happy with how it's gone. One win against Clare, and of course Nolan Park at the weekend passed, and a pretty decent performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it was definitely I suppose, a big win over that Clare team. Like, and even in the Kilkenny game, to be fair, like, you certainly rattled them for close stages. Like, even when you got those two goals quickly, one after the other, like, it looked like maybe at one stage you could have even clawed that game back and maybe caused another scalp as well.
I think so. It's kind of funny because we were chatting to management and one of the players this week, and they actually came away thinking quite disappointed with how they played. Felt it gave Kilkenny too much of a head start in the first half and took them a while to get into it. Rattled off that 2-3, and you were thinking, oh, here we go. What way is this going to end up? Well, Kilkenny being Kilkenny, they can just up it a gear. Kind of wiped out. They had 8 points in a row, sort of wiped out that 2-3 and just kind of maintained that sort of gap, really, just as they can do.
Yeah, and can you remember even, like, I suppose the last time there's been this amount of hype around an Antrim team? I know obviously you beat my own county, Dublin, I suppose, back in 2010. But can you remember yourself the last time there was, I suppose, is this much hype about an Antrim team, I suppose, in hurling?
Honestly, no, not for a while. You probably would be thinking back to 2010, getting the All-Ireland quarter-final, and you were in the Liam McCarthy kind of latter stages a lot of the time, they played Division 1 hurling there back in 2018. Kind of came up from 2A, went straight back down again, but they were still playing. It was Christy Ring at the time, just the year before McDonough came in. So there wasn't the same sort of buzz about it as much as there is now. You can really sense, even though the fans aren't there, there's a bit of a feel-good factor. And what happened last year and carrying on to this year, there's a real kind of buzz about the place.
Absolutely. Like, and I suppose what would you even see, I suppose, is the expectation for the Antrim hurlers in Division 1B? I suppose obviously you've probably played maybe the two of the toughest sides already, and you beat one of them, I suppose, on paper anyway. So where would you be looking for Antrim to even potentially finish in the league? Do you think you could potentially get as high as that first or second position, or what would you be looking towards?
Well, at the very start, you're really looking at this year thinking consolidate really Division 1 and just don't
Yeah.
yo-yo down, because you need to get a couple of years, get up to that sort of speed, the physicality. What you saw in Nolan Park, Kenny's so good at closing down space and into small things, that small half step. It's going to take a while to learn. Same with McCarthy Cup Level 2, and we'll play yourselves in about 6 weeks' time. But at the time, it was just stay up, pick up enough points to stay in. But at the minute, you're kind of looking at games thinking a good performance, and the players are kind of getting into each game thinking, you know what, just taking on its own merit. It's not really, we'll target this one, we'll target that one. Each game's there to be won, they're kind of saying. So I suppose at the minute, you're maybe kind of hoping that you can avoid the relegation playoff first and foremost and bank enough points before that round to kind of give you that sort of breathing space. So, I mean, there's no delusions of grandeur. I mean, there's nobody running around thinking, oh, we're going to win Division 1 here. I mean, that's probably going to happen next year. No.
You're setting
No.
the expectations now.
Yeah, sure. No, really, it's just really a case of trying back maybe another win. Performances at the moment do enough just to kind of, consolidate Division 1 without having to rely that fallback, that safety net, maybe at the end of the league.
Yeah, and I suppose looking ahead, obviously, to that Dublin game, obviously this weekend, at Parnell Park, like, I suppose there's a lot of people obviously at the moment are potentially saying, there's a real opportunity here for Antrim to potentially beat the Dubs. I suppose with the fact that maybe Dublin have had a couple of retirements over the past couple of weeks and whatnot. How do you see the game going yourself?
It's a strange one, really, isn't it? I was chatting at the weekend, just saying, because of course the championship meeting to come, is that going to be a factor in this game at all? I don't think from Antrim's perspective at all, because they know they've just got to bank points in each. We've had so much progress. Why take the foot off the gas? Why kind of look further down the road? They'll be looking to deliver a performance first and foremost. Dublin's going to be very, very difficult. Big score, 30 points there against Laois at the weekend. So a lot of energy about the Dublin team. Antrim's going to have to match that. If you can match that, put in a 70-minute performance, you just kind of see where you really are at the end of it. It's kind of management speak kind of coming through with you at the moment, but it's the reality of it too. You've got to go down and perform, and with 10 minutes to go, you kind of see where you're at. But Antrim players, I'm sure they'll be going down thinking that if they perform, there's no reason why they can't win the game. They're not, there's no kind of expectation they're going to do it, but deliver a good performance and, see where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely going to be an interesting game. All right. And I suppose, what's your overall thoughts even on the Dublin side at the moment as well? Obviously, with some of the changes and whatnot, they've had to obviously bring through a couple of the young lads, I suppose, into the team and make a couple of changes. What's your perspective on Dublin at the moment?
Sure, they're losing a talisman like Conal Keaney and so on. Just it's a real heartbeat of Dublin GA, not hurlers, of course, footballers in the past too. But young lads coming in, bring that kind of fresh energy, that fresh impetus. You looked at the 2 performances in the league, of course, a good win against Laois, and Laois can give any team problems on their day, really have given their fill of it. Of course, you think the championship meeting 2 years ago, had a good performance against Kilkenny. Dublin Hurling just seems to be maybe kind of heading in the right direction again. So, it's going to be a heck of a challenge with Dublin. They've performed quite well last year in the championship against Kilkenny, of course, as well. So the graph seems to be kind of rising.
100%, yeah. And I suppose in general with Antrim, obviously with the fact that you still have, Casement Park potentially being built, hopefully in the next couple of years, what do you kind of see is the ceiling, I suppose, for this Antrim hurling team? Do you think you can be competitive, I suppose, in the All Ireland series, maybe, push on, maybe get to a quarterfinal, semi-final, something like that, or even beyond? What would you see as the roof for this Antrim hurling side?
That is the ambition, for the players. It's a pretty young side. You've got a lot of young kids coming through, from Dunloy. I mean, they're quite very early 20s, an awful lot of players in their early 20s. Suppose you think Neil McManus, touching 33, 33 already, but that's a bit of an anomaly in the team. Below that, you've got guys who played in the 2013 All-Ireland Under-21 final, like team captain Conor McCann, Al McKenna, Johnsons, Mick Bradley, and so on. So, I mean, there's plenty of road left in this team. You think that the experience in Division 1, the confidence they've got, that it can continue on, that group sticks together. That'll be their ambition, of course, to try and be competitive at McCarthy level Division 1. It'll take time, the jump between 2A and 1 it's huge. And McDonagh McCarthy Cup is big as well. So there's a long road ahead. You would hope maybe a couple of years' time that, you can maybe kind of take a couple of scalps in the championship, get into that latter stage around a quarter-final zone. But it's going to take a lot of work.
100%, yeah. I suppose Rome wasn't built in a day, and definitely at the moment you're definitely making the right strides. I suppose, how do you see the game going then? What do you reckon? What's your prediction? Do you reckon you will beat us then?
I think it'll be a very, very tight game. I really do. It could come down to a lot of talk about a lot of frees at the moment, and I saw Dublin hitting half of 30 points from frees as well. So it'll take a really disciplined performance. I hope it doesn't come into a free-taking competition, the way things have gone the first couple of weeks. But I wouldn't say that Antrim's definitely going to win the game, but they could if they perform over 70 minutes. Manage to inflict their kind of game plan on Dublin, then there's every opportunity, maybe bag a goal or two and have a good day, of course, shooting. Then it's possible they could maybe eke out a result.
Yeah, and I suppose, obviously you were alluding to it there, a lot of different rule changes, and I suppose the advantage rule and simulation potentially creeping into the game. I suppose a lot of different takes on all the different rules, and in Gaelic football as well, there's plenty of new rules being implemented. What have you made of all the different changes, I suppose, across the hurling game, I suppose, in general?
It's been kind of strange because the 2 Antrim games I've attended haven't really noticed that kind of a lot of frees so much that you've maybe seen in other games. I know Antrim benefited from a penalty there at the weekend. Keelan Malloy was taken down outside, and there was a black card shown, but that was the first. It really came in. It was actually a club game last week. It was and it turned into a free-taking competition, and it was a hard watch. It was really, what is going on here? You'd hope that settles down. Maybe teams are 2 games in, referees are 2 games in too, and normally these things have a way of ironing themselves out as the year goes on, and I hope that's the case because, yourself, players are able to kind of put the ball over the bar from well inside their own half these days, and a free inside your own 65, it's nearly an automatic. You don't want to see this turn into just a free-taking competition. we hope that bit of physicality can come back into the game. It hasn't really gone anywhere, but just, let fellas hurl a bit, then kind of blow for every slight indiscretion, because as a spectacle, it's going to suffer in the long term, and that's going to impinge really on supporters too, isn't it?
100%, yeah. Like, and I suppose in that analogy I seen, and I suppose I was saying the other day as well, I suppose it's almost become like American football in many ways, like the stop-start nature of it, the fact that there's so many frees and everything else. Like, I suppose, could you see that rule maybe staying? Do you think Congress will make any changes, or do you think that it'll be there for the year?
I think they're going to have to make some sort of a tweak or change to it as well. I do get the cynical fan one. I really do get that. We've seen it a lot over the last couple of years. Something had to be done about that. I think that rule is pretty okay, but it's just the huge number of frees. I don't see where they're warranted, really. I mean, it's a physical game. It's a very, very quick game. There's going to be a lot of contact and a lot of collisions, but unless something's a blatant foul, just play on here.
100%, yeah. Like, hopefully anyway they can definitely make some changes at some point, because definitely we all want to see hurling be the fastest game on grass. That's what it's known for. I suppose we'll run through some of the other games, obviously, that's taking place. I suppose we'll have a look at, we'll stay on the track at Division 1B. Obviously, Kilkenny playing Wexford. I suppose Kilkenny, obviously, you've seen that game. You were there, obviously, when they beat Antrim. Like, what have you made of Kilkenny so far? I suppose they've made a couple of changes, brought through the likes of Alan Murphy and a few of the other lads. Like, what have you made of Kilkenny so far in 2021?
Yeah, obviously last weekend, no TJ Reid. They made a right few changes. They had the benefit of bringing Joey Holden off the bench, actually straight after Antrim hit that 2-3. But Kilkenny seemed to be kind of employing this new sort of short passing style. And last week, you're looking at it a bit and you're thinking, they're nearly caught between two stools. Their traditional sort of game. Are they overplaying the ball, the pass here and there? Is this a long-term project? Are they just trying this, or what's going on? So I think it's nearly the start of maybe a new kind of style for Kilkenny at the moment, and it might take a while to bed in. Games against Wexford, those derbies over the years have been draws. There've been very little between those games. Wexford obviously rise it whenever they play Kilkenny. They love playing their neighbours. So you can kind of see that game maybe being maybe a point either way, or who knows, maybe even the draw.
Yeah, I suppose they definitely look like they definitely are trying a few different things out, Kilkenny, obviously, at the moment. And I suppose, like, a lot of people probably had the perspective maybe that Brian Cody was maybe, this was maybe going to be his last year, next year was going to be his last year. But I suppose if he's making these changes and he's embedding things in for the long term and bringing through young lads, like, it certainly looks like he's going to be around for a while, yeah.
Absolutely. What's the point in kind of changing tact after 20 odd years now for the sake of 1 year? It just doesn't add up. So it does look like Cody's kind of looking to the future, kind of trying, like say last week, Murphy just on the frees instead of TJ not there as well. Obviously a change in goalkeeper as well, and different kind of positions around the field. So it does look like that he's maybe looking to kind of bring in new lads again. But I suppose they've not had the benefit of a pre-season. So this is maybe what they're kind of using this for now, no Walsh Cup or whatever.
Yeah, and I suppose for Wexford, obviously they had that big win, obviously, over Clare, and the whole Davy Fitz, Brian Lohan saga and everything else. But I suppose a big win for Wexford, like 2 wins for 2 for them, and I suppose they're in a great position to potentially go on, kick on, and potentially even finish, I suppose, top of the league.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a great win for Wexford. It looked like it wasn't going to be their day last week, but clawed it back rightly and came out with a win. As I mentioned there, like the games against Kilkenny are always kind of, it's that derby feel to them that can really go either way. And they'll go in this weekend thinking, you know what, if we can get the 2 points in this one, we're 1 foot in the final, and trying to maybe lay down a marker for Leinster later in the year too, which is you're kind of getting into at the moment as well, because there's a good chance they could meet again. But yeah, you've got to be impressed with how Wexford have bounced back from last year's championship. They'll be disappointed with how that went, considering how things went in 2019. So I think it's a big year for that group of players.
100%, yeah, and I suppose it'd be interesting to see what Davey does with that team as well, and whether he embeds a few more players coming into the team. I suppose Laois and Clare is the other game in Division 1B. I suppose 2 defeats in a row for Clare. It definitely probably hasn't gone according to plan for them. But I suppose looking at Laois, I suppose you'd have to imagine that Clare would get the victory here.
You would think so, but then I suppose we thought that in the championship last year, and then they were very, very lucky to get a 1 point win against Laois. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, this game. And Tony Kelly limped out of the game last week. I don't know what was suspected dead leg. I'm not sure if he's back or not. He'd be a huge loss. Like Shanahan at the edge of the square. We saw him up at Corrigan Park in the first game as well. John Conlon dropping back for Clare. So I I know Brano, he's trying to have a look at different players in different positions too, but it's getting to the stage where you're going to need to start winning points here because games are going to run out, and a defeat against Laois would leave them in a very, very difficult position at the minute. So it's almost like a bit of a championship feel to this one, really, isn't it? Because both teams
Yeah.
they'll probably both kind of fancy themselves and get the 2 points and know that defeat will leave them in a pretty dark place.
Yeah, I suppose that's it, isn't it? Because I suppose if Laois could pull off a massive scalp here, it would leave them in a fantastic position then potentially. I mean, who knows who could end up finishing bottom then? And I suppose if Clare were to, finish in a relegation playoff, I mean, it would definitely be, I suppose, a lot of pressure on them potentially going into the All Ireland Championship, I suppose, then as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've heard, we know about all the kind of stuff going on in the background, and Clare really but kind of park that and just the actual group players themselves. I mean, it wasn't so long ago this group were knocking on the door of an All Ireland. I mean, they had those epic games against Galway, and you're kind of wondering why it's at where it is now. Really, again, I suppose we're looking at it's early season. It's 2 games in. There's no point getting too carried away at the minute, but eventually things are maybe going to have to click into gear. They did look a lot better against Wexford at the weekend. They want to raise that again, and winning momentum is a massive thing. If they go into the championship off the back of a dismal league campaign, it's not really kind of looking good for a long summer for them.
Yeah, and I suppose moving on to Division 1A, we'll have a look at some of the games there. I suppose starting off, obviously, with Tip and Galway. I mean, that's definitely going to be, an interesting game altogether. Like, obviously, Galway, I suppose, probably the team to what most people would say after that win over Limerick. Like, they're probably the most likely team maybe to beat Limerick in the championship again later in the year.
They kind of have the style for it, don't they? And they showed it there at the weekend. Joe and so on coming back into the team after missing the first week out. Galway will probably think that they maybe sort of left that All-Ireland semi-final behind them a bit last year because they did miss a lot of chances and they didn't, I don't know. And so was Canning going off injured and it's a game that probably kicked themselves that they didn't win the All-Ireland final, of course, a few years ago too. And Limerick have sort of had that Indian sign on them, but that's a big win, I suppose, for Galway's morale. They've actually got one over in Limerick the first time in a few years, and they'll hope to kick on from that as well. Games between Galway and Tipperary, of course, never boring. They all seem to produce these classics between themselves. So,
100%, yeah.
Yeah, you'll be hoping that that the same kind of that form repeats this weekend. But Galway in a very good place, and they'll be kind of flying high off that win at the weekend.
Yeah, and I suppose for Tipperary, I suppose they're definitely, trying a few different things out. I suppose a lot of teams are really because it's basically like shadow boxing, I suppose, in many ways. Like a lot of these games, like a lot of teams don't want to play their hand, I suppose, ahead of the championship when I suppose there's not really too much on the line in the league. But I suppose for Tipperary, like 2 draws for them in their opening 2 games, I suppose definitely showed a lot of promise in there. But I suppose, like, where would you kind of see them as, I suppose, in terms of even the All Ireland? Like, would you put them as close as maybe a Galway to Limerick, or where would you kind of put them?
I think you would, really. I mean, Tipperary can be notoriously slow starters in the league. They have got 2 draws against Limerick and last week against Corkford with that massive free just right at the death, just to get a draw out of it. Like, so I suppose Liam Sheedy's kind of this time of year, he's always going to be looking at players and looking at different things. Tipperary have the capabilities, of course. They have the firepower. They've plenty of experience. For a lot of those players, maybe they're coming to the end of their career. They might think that there's one last hurrah left in them, and this could be the year to do it. We all know about the back-to-back thing, which I haven't done since the 50s or so. Like, so, they're All-Ireland champions just a couple of years ago, and I mean, they've plenty of potential. They've plenty in them to go and make a huge dent in it this year as well. And of course, you can never rule them out.
And what do you reckon then? Do you reckon it'll be Galway then to take the points, or how do you see it going?
I'll take Galway in this one just because the momentum we're going to carry on from last week, and I think you'll probably see an improved Tip, and you might sort of see them maybe settling down to more of a familiar look about them. But Galway just with that bit of momentum behind them, might just take this one.
Yeah, and I suppose Waterford Limerick. I suppose that's a repeat of the All Ireland final, of course, from last year. I suppose, like, should we read too much into that loss for Limerick? Like, I suppose it is just a league game, but how do you see it yourself?
Having that winning momentum for so long, and then you kind of get a defeat, I suppose maybe you turn around and you start thinking, I wouldn't say to question themselves at all. I mean, that'd be going a bit too far, but yeah, I suppose it's maybe a bit of a shock to the system. They'll be mad keen to bounce back in this one. I think it's actually a perfect game for them, really, to bounce back against most of their rivals. Waterford maybe not going too well at the start of the league. Limerick, still have a lot of players to maybe come back in. Gillan only came in as a sub and stuff last week. So, yeah, I'd say John Kiley will maybe light a fire into them after that one, and you might start to see them maybe start to turn the screw and make the final descent really towards championship. And this is maybe the weekend they're going to start doing that.
Yeah, and I suppose for Waterford, you kind of alluded to it there. Like, I suppose they made 12 changes in the Westmeath game, and it was definitely probably a lot closer than people think. But how would you see this going in total then, I suppose? I mean, Limerick certainly probably the favourites going into this.
They've got to be favourites. They've got to be big favourites. Waterford, of course, were beaten badly by Cork the first day out as well. So it's really not been going. It's not been a good couple of weeks for them. But that'll learn final last year. Limerick were head and shoulders above them really at the end. It was quite a procession really by the end of that game. Waterford are a lot better than what they've showed so far. Of course, they've made all those changes. They'll probably think that this could be the game for them actually to maybe kind of raise it a bit too, and that sort of motivation to go and maybe try and right a wrong almost. They would maybe think of the All-Ireland final last year, but they seem to be coming from a lot further way back than Limerick are at the minute, and I really can't see them getting anything out of this.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough for them, all right. I suppose in the league you never know, like crazy things have happened before, like, and it's not improbable, I suppose, for them to pick up the points. I suppose Cork are probably the team on most people's lips at the moment. They play Westmeath, and I suppose with the way they're playing, like they're kind of scintillating play going forward with the goal chances and all the rest. Like, I suppose they're looking quite the proposition at the moment.
They're going to be very happy with how they started. That big win against Waterford. Drew, of course, there just the weekend against Tipperary. I suppose to be disappointed with the draws with typical late scores, but yeah, Cork look like they're heading in the right direction. This team at the minute, they've kind of found their identity a small bit. Like they made a couple of changes in personnel, and yeah, this seemed a team that maybe kind of know a bit more about themselves at this stage of the game. Like and. After a couple of years of, they were kind of challenging to a certain extent, but unable to maybe kind of beat that glass ceiling. So a lot of their style of play maybe is kind of geared towards beating those sort of top teams at the minute. And yeah, it's looking good for now.
Yeah, and I suppose for Westmeath, like they definitely showed a lot of fight in that Waterford game. Like, I suppose some people were kind of saying, like, after the hammering against Galway, that maybe it was a little bit unfair that they had to play with all those teams in Division 1A. But I suppose they probably proved their worth in many ways against Waterford. Like, they certainly put it up to Waterford throughout the game. And Killian Doyle probably on his day, like one of the best players probably in the country.
Absolutely. I mean, I've watched Westmeath a lot over the years, really, at McDonagh Cup or league games and so on. And they stayed up in Division 1 last year, don't forget. So, I mean, they're not just a team just jumping in. It's their first dipping their toes here, and they've taken a bad beating. It's just they've been a bit of a rut, I thought. I mean, last year's McDonagh Cup was so surprised when they came to Belfast and Antrim won that game handily. Really thought Antrim were missing a lot of players. I kind of thought Westmeath actually could win this one, but they just had a bit of a bad campaign. Just that kind of maybe a bit of a bad run of things, and somehow that you kind of get into that sort of habit. But the game last week, okay, they lost the game down in Waterford, but I mean, they'll take an awful lot from that, and a lot of confidence really that this is probably more about what Westmeath are about than the game against Galway, and they'll go in against the Cork team just thinking, what, we've nothing to lose here really. We've kind of shown what we're about, and that sort of performance last week could maybe drive them on a bit. Maybe not enough to win a game, but certainly to put in a good performance.
Yeah, and I suppose I'd imagine anyway they're probably trying to get up to full speed. I suppose by the time that Joe McDonagh Cup campaign does come around and a relegation playoff and whatnot as well. I suppose we'll touch on Division 2A, like just have a look through some of them games. I suppose I wanted to get your perspective on Down as well. I suppose a fellow Ulster man, of course. I suppose for Down, like that was a huge win over Carlow, and Paul Sheehan looks to be a serious talent down there for Down.
Absolutely, that was a huge. I didn't really see that one coming. I thought Down when they're playing Ballycran, you never get anything easy there when you play them down in the yards. Just thought with Carlow's being a seasoned team, they play at McCarthy Cup level, they've been Division 1, and you thought, Carlow just that bit further down the road, but it just shows you where Down are at. I mean, they've had sort of combined schools things going together in the Ulster colleges. That really seems to be kind of bearing fruit at the minute, that you've got, it's basically nearly a Down minor team rendered in the Ulster colleges competitions, and it's really seemed to have helped. A lot of younger players are starting to come into their team, and that was a big win. They lost down in Kerry the first day, but it was really 4 poor goals they gave away, really, and again, down in Tralee, it's not an easy place to go to as well. So Down are proving that they're very much competitive at this level, and they'll take a lot of confidence from that and think they can maybe drive it on a bit.
Yeah, and I suppose they beat Offaly, of course, last year as well, obviously in the Joe McDonough on penalties. And I suppose when you look at how good Offaly are at the moment as well, like with them, like they look to be back on the rise. I suppose, like when you kind of put all that into perspective, I suppose it definitely looks like down or potentially, I suppose, on the up as well.
Yeah, absolutely they are. As mentioned, they're the pretty young team, very, very talented hurlers. A good thing about the down team as well, they're not just all from the yards, the Portaferry, Ballycrown, Ballygallagher. You're getting fellas from kind of the South Down, Uri, carried off Breda, clubs and East Belfast, I suppose you would say. So you're getting more of a spread of hurling kind of about the county that you maybe didn't have in the past. And that certainly seemed to have benefited the county team, that they've got more of a pick of players.
And I suppose for Offaly, like they look to be back on the rise. Like that was 2 big wins. And I suppose for them to be carried away they did, I mean, it was scintillating stuff.
It was, I think whenever Offaly got relegated the other year, we expected us to bounce straight back up, and it just hasn't happened for them. There's been a free fall for a couple of years, and you're wondering, are they really as bad as what they're showing? Probably not. Again, it's those things, just low morale. You never know. You just that kind of losing happen, and it's hard to really shake it. It seemed to have turned the corner this year. That was a huge win last week against Kerry. Again, Kerry 4 times last year, Antrim played. You know how tough they are and how difficult they are to play against. They're a big, big physical team. And for Offaly to put that sort of score up and win so well was a bit of an eye-opener, really. And it shows it really probably more what Offaly are about. And it kind of shows what their ambitions are this year, that they're absolutely determined to really start righting a few wrongs.
Yeah, and I suppose from a Kerry point of view, like it was obviously a tough defeat to take. And I suppose they're playing Meath this weekend. So I suppose back to the drawing board, I suppose, for many ways for Kerry after that loss.
It is, yeah. I suppose that was a big shock to the system for Kerry, because considering how close they came, Kerry, a puck of the ball, really could have been playing Division 1 McCarthy Cup this year themselves. In those games, they were in the finals of both. So to have that kind of a start, that big defeat last week was just, I'm sure, you probably wonder what went wrong in that one. But was it just a blip? I'm willing to give them benefit of the doubt. I think it carries a pretty handy side. I would expect them to go beat Meath. Saw Meath last year too. I mean, it can be pretty competitive. If you don't treat them with respect, Meath will give you a tough day out. But you'd expect Kerry to bounce back from that one.
Yeah, 100%. Well, perfect, David. Anyway, I appreciate you jumping on. Anyways, and I suppose best of luck, I suppose, with Antrim in the future. I definitely don't hope you beat the Dubs anyway, but sure, I suppose we'll see how it goes.
Indeed, no problem at all here. Pleasure.